Goedemiddag, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our panel of Aconium GmbH here at the FTTH Conference 2025 in beautiful Amsterdam. My name is Alfons Schöps. I'm the head of the Brussels Liaison Office of Aconium, and it is my pleasure and honor to welcome you all here at this panel. We have panelists, 7 panelists from 6 nations, and they will discuss this beautiful slogan, Digital Infrastructures in Europe, Resilience, Financing, and the Goals of Digital Decade 2030. I think this is a very promising headline, a very promising issue we will topple, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. And it's now my pleasure to introduce to you the moderator of this beautiful panel, and this is Maxi Kusatz from our Aconium headquarters in Berlin, Germany. Have a nice afternoon, an interesting afternoon, and good discussion. Thank you very much for being here.
All right, lots of technology, which is good for a digital infrastructure conference, I guess. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us at today's panel discussion, where we will focus on the digital infrastructure in Europe, as Alfons said, resilience, financing, and the goals of the digital decade. I'm really, really proud to be here today and also to represent Aconium as a partner of the FTTH conference. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to our panelists in a moment. But I would like to take a moment to set the scene. So in preparation for the conference, my colleagues and I discussed a lot what we want our point to be that comes across. And obviously, as a consultant firm in the digital infrastructure sphere in Europe, we want to look at Europe and Europe's goals and how we're getting there, and maybe where we could do a little bit better here and there. And that goes hand in hand with the topic of financing. We find the necessity to create more stable, sustainable, long-term financing that will allow us not only to reach the goals set for 2030, but that will allow us to look into the future as well. However, that is a round topic in itself, but we cannot ignore the macroeconomic and political sphere that we are all living in at the moment. So for us, it was absolutely prudent to also have a look at resilience of infrastructure. Not just at the infrastructure that is in our ground, but also the infrastructure or the digital space we're using on a day-to-day basis. So, the Digital Decade 2030. What does the EU aim for? They aim for universal gigabit coverage, full 5G rollout, and a stronger, more autonomous digital economy. But where do we stand today? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? I think this conversation really goes beyond connectivity. It is about Europe's digital future. So today we will explore the digital decade and its process. We will explore financing of digital infrastructure and the energy connection. And we will focus on resilience, how we secure our infrastructure against cyber attacks, war, and supply chain disruptions. So we really have an exceptional panel today, and I'm very, very glad to introduce our speakers that come from across policy, investment, and industry. And I'm happy to introduce to my right directly Alexandra Routinho from DG Connect. As Deputy Head of Unit at DG Connect, Alexandra directly is involved in shaping the EU's digital future. She will provide us with insights into the most important topics, into developments, into ongoing initiatives, and Europe's progress and the future goals. After, I would like to represent to you Fernando Huerta Aguirre from the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Spain. And as you know, maybe, Spain has been actively working on mapping digital infrastructure gaps and leveraging both public and private funding models. Mariana, can see you over there. Marianne Serkaino from the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry in Finland will be showcasing how rural connectivity and cybersecurity, even in remote regions, can be reached and what we can learn from that. And it's also my pleasure to introduce to you to Moritz Weiss. Moritz, hi. Moritz is Managing Director of Investor Relations and the Head of DACH Fundraising at Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners is one of the world's leading greenfield infrastructure managers with, I believe, over 32 billion assets under management. And I think you will ask yourself why we have an energy investor on the stage of a digital conference, but we will make that connection later in life, or later in this panel, or I hope not later in life. Then it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Yuri Matzik from the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Ukraine. Ukraine has had to rethink digital resilience in real time due to what is happening right now and its experience in emergency infrastructure deployment. I would also like to take this moment to introduce you to one of our, not panelists, but one of our, wow, there we go, German and English mixture is really good today. One of our audience members today, Valery Mutlyov, who is the first secretary of the Ukrainian embassy to the Netherlands. So please, everyone, give a round of applause. I'm very happy for you to be here. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Mark Gerban. Mark is the head of product at Pairpoint, and we invited Pairpoint here. Pairpoint is a joint venture between Vodafone and Sumitomo, because we want to not only look at infrastructure as our networks that we create, but also on the infrastructure that we use on a day-to-day basis, and how that infrastructure is heavily reliant on resilience as well. So before we dive into the discussion, I'd like to invite Alexandra to give us a little bit of background of the Digital Decade 2030 strategy, so to know what we are actually talking about. What are our main goals as EU citizens going forward in the next 5 years? So, Alex.
Thank you so much, Maxi. Thank you for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy for at least 2 reasons. It's a comeback for me. So I was at an FTTH conference in Amsterdam in 2019, talking at the time about the gigabit targets for 2025. And what I see coming back 6 years and 2 jobs later is that the topic has become not less relevant, it's quite the contrary. It's becoming more important, more central, at least to our work. And the second reason is that I really like the twist you gave to the panel and the introduction, because I think it's really well tuned with how we conduct our work on connectivity now and on resilience. So you introduced my speech as talking about the Digital Decade targets, and of course I've been doing that so long, I'm happy to recall them. They are mainly as far as digital connectivity goes, because Digital Decade is about all targets for digital transformation, right? On connectivity, because this is what we're talking about, it concerns gigabit coverage for all and seamless, uninterrupted 5G coverage to all the populated areas. And unless you're really in the topic and you hear it for the first time, it sounds as if it's an inclusion angle to our work. That inclusion angle, which I'm sure will be covered in the panel as well, remains just as valid. It's just that we have an extra level of, let's say, ambition or complexity to conducting our work on connectivity. And this is my slogan moment of the day as the person that as the panel was introduced. And it's, I think the key message from my side would be that now connectivity is not only about inclusion, it's really at the core of the competitiveness agenda, and it is very much also, and it's becoming more and more about security and about resilience, about strategic autonomy. But let me do my duty also, because the issue is where do we stand in Europe now? I don't have fresh new data. The fresh new data will be delivered in June with the 2025 Digital Decade, so I can only reuse basically what we published almost 1 year ago, and that said that we are at 64 percent coverage of FTTH and almost 5G. And the good message for that report was that we have seen a very important increase in FTTH rollout. And for that, I owe a big thank you to everybody that worked with us, probably much more than us, to deliver that. The growth had been significant at the moment, if I remember correctly, 14%. Having said that, of course, we noted that we're not really at the level of the world competitors that we were looking at, and also that remains a lot of untapped potential, especially on the, also on the side of the 5G, because it's not really the 5G that we wanted to see rolled out to deliver or to support those applications that will deliver, that will enable the use cases that I'm sure my fellow panelists can talk much more about and make it maybe more fleshy and more interesting. Now, more importantly, I think you may be familiar with this white paper where we launched, in a way, our vision of connectivity in the future. And that was the other magical phrase, the 3 Cs, the connected collaborative computing. We, of course, if we don't see real 5G, if we don't see fiber more or less everywhere, I think it's hard to say that we're getting closer at the speed that we wanted to want to see. So, or in any case, that quite some work remains to be done. And that is quite important because we have, of course, our new commission in place, and I'm sure it has not escaped unnoticed that the focus of the new commission is very much on competitiveness. So maybe it's not explicitly digital, but as soon as you go into our work programs and as soon as you see what are the concrete plans, you see really how much digital it's in there. So it concerns the transformation, of course, of the ICT sector, the growth of the ICT sector, the realization of the potential of the data economy, and there's a lot of focus on the digital transformation of industries, in supporting the industries to catch up with the innovation gap, to really unleash all this potential. So, of course, everybody in this room, I'm sure, knows very, very well how important the digital networks are as part of that. Now, it's, of course, not only the commission that changed. It's not that we have a new commission, although we repute it to be very self-centered, no, in the speakings. It's very, very clear to everyone that the world that we live in has changed a lot, that there are circumstances that make us be much more focused on security, on resilience, and on strategic autonomy. What does it mean? Again, it doesn't mean that the inclusion angle and that the competitiveness angle move, that it's just another additional layer. It forces us to think of connectivity needs in a broader perspective, to think about the security of the networks, to think about the security of supply for the network components, to think about economic risks, to think about cyber risks, to think about hybrid risks. There is quite a lot of work ongoing on both sides. I would say, of course, the panel is about funding, and my job is about public funding, so give me the privilege to start with that. On the funding side, there is quite a lot of public funding at EU level going for connectivity. Surely you're aware of ERDF, you are aware of RRF. These are, let's say, our classic funding instruments that are very much based on the funding gap level. I'm quoting now from the same resource that I was quoting for the connectivity figures. Where are we on connectivity? I think at the same time last year we were counting that at least 14 billion of these funds, RRF and ERDF funds, and these are not the only funding, by the way, you will maybe hear a bit later. There is also national funding. They go to connect the unconnected areas. This is, let's say, the more classical approach. Now, I will, of course, privilege the CEF because this is my area of work. And we are, our funding is not so significant in terms of volume. The whole CEF Digital is less than 2 billion. But on the other hand, where I think we do things differently is we try to be more innovative. So to give you an example that supports the competitiveness angle, we have been funding and we continue to fund 5G deployments, but always linked to the use cases, always linked to the vertical use cases. There was funding in the first work program. I hope I'm not wrong when I'm saying that more or less 200 million is already committed and going to projects that support very innovative use cases across really all the sectors, from city management to hospitals to agriculture. And these are the type of projects that we want to see replicated through Europe. So when we go for funding, we always go to stimulate demand, to show, to make sectors and users go together to understand the importance of this high-capacity connectivity, and to, of course, select excellent projects. That's what you get to do when you don't have so much money. So we get a lot of over-subscription in the calls, and then you have the benefit to say, these projects are excellent, go ahead and do it elsewhere in Europe as well. We have a second...
Just one question. You mentioned the 3 Cs.
Yeah.
Do you think we as Europe can be more collaborative to push this topic ahead?
To put as more collaborative,
Yeah.
I'm very sure we as Europe can be more collaborative. I can think of collaboration of all kinds. I can think of collaborations across sectors, where I was just getting to. I can think of collaborations between the authorities, and I can, of course, which is probably the topic par excellence here, think of more collaboration between private and public funding, right?
Exactly.
And if you will just let me
Sorry.
go to the let's say, heading towards the end of my introduction, just to try to introduce the whole range of our activities. Then there's the other part on resilience, which we are already funding, and that concerns the global gateway. So in CEF, we do even more funding for resilience that concerns core networks, and there is a part on submarine cables, but there is not only submarine cables, there are also quantum communication infrastructure. There was quite some funding going in the first program, and now we're moving towards second program, so we're talking about 540 million that has already committed, and there's just about as much available for the coming period until the end of this 7 years budgetary period. This is how it works at the EU. Now, of course, I understand very well, although this is about financing, it's not all about financing. I would say in some cases it's even more about regulation, or, as I've heard my fellow panelists talk, deregulation, but allow me to do the job until the end. And that, of course, on the side of competitiveness, you are surely aware that to realize this 3C, we have an important effort ongoing on let's not call it deregulation, because that would really be oversimplifying. And although
what
this
did we
is
call it? We call it structured deregulation. Maybe we need to discuss that further at some point.
Actually, what we call it is a serious, profound effort to thoroughly revise the regulatory framework in order to deliver a more pro-investment and pro-innovation regulatory framework for electronic communication, so that we can see those investments in the 3 Cs, deployments connected to use cases, to AI-intensive applications, integrating edge and cloud capabilities. This is a little bit what we're trying to do on the deregulation side. And also there is important work going on the security side, and that will be, bear with me, my last point, and that, of course, includes, just to give you some names, it started probably with the cybersecurity toolbox for 5G. Now there is work going on cybersecurity of submarine cables. Most recently, the action plan on cybersecurity of cables, and that is, let's say, building on the cable cybersecurity toolbox, but adding also prevention and, deterrence and response, so more angles to the same issue, and it might as well be that we continue this effort into a more comprehensive work frame to look at all the networks. I mean, I kind of get from your body language that I spoke more than enough.
I'm stressed, right?
And to be fair, I'm here to listen and I'm here to learn, so I'm very curious what the others have to say.
The audience doesn't see this, but I have this 50-centimeter countdown clock that reminds me every 2 seconds that we only have 75 minutes. So thank you so much for really laying the ground for the rest of our discussions. I think that maybe my phrase of structured deregulation is a little bit too simplistic to what needs to occur. But I think there will be a lot of change going forward, and we must work together from the regulatory and from the industry side to really make sure that everyone is considered in the process. So thank you for that. I would kind of like to move a little bit, I feel very structured here, into the more lightning talks of our discussion. So each of the panelists will get a little bit of time to showcase their most important points in relation to the topic that we would like to discuss. And I think I will just kick it off with Fernando and go down the line. Take three to 4 minutes, I would say. Introduce yourself, tell the audience why you think this is important, and have fun.
In my case, thank you very much, Maxi, and thank you very much for Aconium, and of course all the audience and my colleagues. Well, in my case, I work for the Telecommunications Ministry in Spain, and I work in coverage area and managing public funding as well. The most part of them comes from Europe. We in Spain have, I think, a very good shape on coverage. At least in FTTH, we reached last year 95.2. So at least at the end of June on 2023, we are in the first position. We don't know in the next version of Digital Decade indexes if this will still be in the same or not. And we have to recognize that the most part of this big achievement is because this private and public co-investment since a long time ago, at least since 2013, we started this kind of public and private co-investment. We have here some figures. We reckon 1.3 billion as public funding since that year and 2.2 billion of private funding, and most focused on municipalities under 10,000 inhabitants. So this implies that we work on where we found there's a market failure on terms to achieve this 100 and towards 1 gigabit per second in 5 years. This is mostly about fiber. In terms of radio access, we work a lot in 5G. What we reach is, of course, not so huge percentage of coverage, but what we are trying to improve dramatically is in the backhaul and as well in some of the electronic equipment in the radio access network. So this permits us to change from 4G to 5G in a lot of municipalities, especially focused on those below 5,000 inhabitants. So again, we think this is the right way on where we have to gap the market failures and the welfare of social equality in this kind of areas on where it's not easy, that the private money see a clear business case, and of course putting aside public funding for do so. Of course, there are not good news. We have or still having wide areas without such kind of broadband access, neither fixed or of mobile. And we put 2 years ago a new program, as well funded with public funds, called Rural Demand, that allow with satellite reach at least 100 megabits per second in every single place all over our geography. We put 600 euros per household and a subsidized tariff. So this allows that many people has this speed wherever they being located. And there's a lot of course as well, RID, research and development programs funded with European funds in 5G, in 6G, in allow resilience for cloud initiatives, for create ecosystems in the surroundings of cloud ecosystems. So this is again another angle to see whether private and public funds could work together. So I think this is the most important things. We develop as well 5G corridors and cable submarines among, for instance, Canary Islands, or between France and Spain, or Portugal and Spain. So this is again some of the funds that we use from Europe to fund these PPP initiatives. So I think that's it.
That's it?
Yeah.
Excellent. If you don't mind, Yuri, maybe we can jump to Marianne, because I know that she works a lot in Finland with connecting the rural areas in particular, and it kind of goes hand in hand, and then we continue to the more resilient side of things. Marianne, maybe you want to introduce yourself really quickly, and also give a bit of input what Finland is doing in particular to be able to bring fiber connectivity to areas that maybe aren't so accessible.
Thank you, Maxi. So my name is Marianne Selkänho, and I come from Finland. I work in the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, and in our ministry we are responsible for EU's common agricultural policy, and the Rural Fund is part of that CAP nowadays. So we have been funding rural broadband from EAFRD since 2009, and these projects have been really effective. They are really quite small, but they are really bottom up and really cost effective, because people really need that connection. So this is really good funding model in Finland. And Finland is 95% rural area, so the most of Finland is rural. And we have 1,300 kilometers borderline with Russia, and you know that it's really rural and really sparsely populated area. And the connectivity in that area is really bad, and there are people living there, and they need the connection. So one model in Finland is to form cooperatives and start to build fiber in sparsely populated areas, because nobody else will. So people have been doing it by themselves, and they become operators as such. And we have got quite many of those cooperatives that are building and owning their own fiber network, and they have started as village association or other associations, which we have thousands in Finland. We are the land of associations. Resilience and security is my favorite topic, and because we have this hostile neighbor, so we must do a lot with our security, with also our rural funding from CAP.
Thank you. I think security and resilience, that brings us very nicely to Yuri, and to the importance that we're seeing right now. Maybe you want to take it away.
Thank you, Maxi, for introducing. If you don't mind, I would like something to add.
Of course.
I am the guy making sure the internet doesn't take a break, so Ukraine can work, study, and let's be honest, occasionally escape from overwhelming news. Imagine zombie outbreak, asteroid impact, alien invasion, done. The only still working Ukrainian Wi-Fi. It's a joke. Let's not forget it's been 3 years since Ukrainians resist full-scale invasion. And a huge part of our success is a stable internet connection. Despite damaged network, huge cyber attacks, and the lack of materials to restore it faster. We spent countless hours in bomb shelters. Actually, we realized we had to get used to work and studying, almost living there. And as you might guess, at first, there was no internet, no mobile connection, just total darkness. So what did we do? We adapted. Comfort for Ukrainians isn't about 5-star hotels. It's about having Wi-Fi in the bomb shelters. Today, over 60,000 bomb shelters in Ukraine are equipped with internet connections. We kept the country online because in Ukraine, even the internet refuses back down. Who here has watched Fedor Ikilar's stand-up from Amsterdam about his travel to Ukraine? Okay, never. He had perfect internet Wi-Fi in bomb shelters while sitting in bomb shelters during a missile attacks. He was looking at the phone screen, watching a food delivery man cycling through the sirens to bring his order on time. And he couldn't believe he was able to see it from the deep basement. That's Ukrainians. The economy keep running. Schools, kindergarten, hospitals, factories, banks, and government services are online because internet success isn't just about convenience, it's about resilience, it's about saving our lives. Right now, Ukrainians only experience connections issued during large-scale attacks. That's pretty rare, but the start of this full-scale invasion, it was a different story. Russian troops constantly attacked Ukrainians' energy infrastructure, trying to leave us without electricity, heat, and communication. Could you work under such pressure? Unfortunately for us, it's just another day in the office. So we pulled through, exceeded even on our expectation, and came out stronger. Now we are ready to share that we are learned. So how did we stay online? 2 things: teamwork and courage. Telecom industry in Ukraine isn't about cables, signals, and technology. It's about people, engineers, operators, IT specialists. They don't ask if network can be restored, only how fast. And trust me, they can make you believe in miracles. It's a team effort. Companies, government, and industry experts are all working together. When Russians are like, we destroyed their power plants, our Ukrainian engineers respond, thank you for the excuse to install 5G. By the way, this year, some cities in Ukraine are setting it up. No matter how many times they try to disconnect us, we always find a way to reconnect. Because in Ukraine, connectivity isn't just about convenience, isn't just about comfort, it's about survival. So here are 4 key points, what we took. First, restoration of connection and telecom infrastructure. We changed government rules to accelerate network reconstruction. We defended operators when legal barriers slowed them down. We worked to restore infrastructure despite mines areas. Second, international support with equipment. Numerous country and private enterprises donated critical equipment and their expertise. The Netherlands is a leader in the support. allocated over 7 billion euros to Ukraine only this year alone. Third, rapid adaptation to the new challenges. All mobile operators united to set up internal roaming. At the start of the full-scale invasion, they received new frequencies for free. The government cut fees for using electricity poles. And lastly, resilience during long-term blackouts. We assessed internet resilience under power outage many times. We set strict rules requiring networks to stay online without electricity. These 4 pillars kept Ukraine connected. We are just not rebuilt the internet, we are refining what's possible. And guess what? Scientists have just found out what's stronger than graphene or titanium. The answer is Ukrainian Wi-Fi and mobile connection at this moment. This was a joke. But there is still a lot of work ahead to improve our resilience in long run. We've learned that fixed and mobile internet are inseparable. Nearly 80% of internet traffic flows through fixed connection. Even with mobile phone, people mostly use Wi-Fi. That's why the government is focusing on improving stable fixed internet. We conducted a nationwide study of network readiness during outages and found that PON, passive optical network, is the best technology. So we are promoting it. For operators, we created special benefits for network builders and new PON projects. For customers, we made an educational film on the advantages of PON. It's even available in English. You can find it on the website of DIA Education. During the war, we doubled the number of PON users to 4 million in Ukraine. How almost the entire country can survive a 72 hours blackout while staying connected? Because let's be honest, if Ukraine internet can handle power cuts, selling, and even your neighbor secretly streaming, moving on your Wi-Fi, it can handle anything. We are strong in making fast decisions. We have a soft spot in forming resilient digital infrastructure in the long term. That's why we are open to engage different experts to work together.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Moritz, you look extremely eager to speak, but I'm going to be impolite again and potentially skip to Mark.
Nice.
Because I think Mark can give us a little bit of insight of what resilience means, not on a network level, and how we can potentially have a little bit of a different approach, in particular when it comes to communication of devices, as I understand. So I'm not a very technical person, but he's excellent at this. And I'm sure he will manage to sell his point in 2 minutes and 9 seconds.
Super easy. Okay. So my perspective is a little bit more, I'd say, positive, because I think at least that's a very tough situation to live with in Ukraine. So obviously, there's a lot to learn from that side. My background is actually more on the product side. So I actually just recently finished a stint over at Mercedes-Benz in research and development, and worked on a lot of V2X vehicle to different types of object communication. And now I'm working for a Vodafone company, which is kind of focusing on this. So the way I kind of see things is that objects in themselves can communicate and even bounce signals off of each other. And that's kind of where we saw probably during the COVID times, as some of you probably have had like within your countries, the Corona app, if people do remember that. And I believe that having systems in place as backups to core infrastructure is kind of something that's very often not talked about. Most of my perspective is that if I have a product that is working, so let's say a vehicle has to have, let's take autonomous driving as an example, various sensor types, right? Now, if you're driving and your LiDAR and your radar and your cameras are working in conjunction, they form a picture around you. And that actually allows you to actually see what's in front of you. However, when some of those sensor types fail, you need to have redundancy systems, or that car is going to drive off a cliff. That means that someone might actually die, right? It's not really a safe thing, I would imagine, right? The interesting thing about the infrastructure discussions that I haven't been seeing talking about is that a lot of the applications that are being built for within fiber optic networks we're talking about pure infrastructure of other industries. So for example, if I take a fiber optic line and I connect it to telephone poles with just basic signals, basic bips, right? People kind of go, well, what the heck is that going to do? It's going to do me nothing, right? I'd like you to think about it from another perspective. I'd like you to think about it from a data perspective. If I have an autonomous car and I have multiple sensors that fail, yet I can determine that the road is on this side and this side, or rather the telephone poles are on this side and this side, I actually know the width of that road. And therefore, I have information to help create a safer driver experience. So there's a lot of things which I find from a resilience factor that have to be taken into account. I think that we also need to think a bit more about a cross-platform-ish direction. I used to work also over at Apple, and we focused always on having experiences be completely seamless, right? When things are kind of just straight line, which is what most of the industry is right now, because let's face it, we're building fiber optic pipes here, if you will. You have to also think about the applications and ways these things actually jump into other ecosystems. So one of the things I would actually encourage is there probably has to be a lot of cross-pollination with different industries. For example, I would love to see more discussions with the automotive industry and this industry, quite simply because there's a lot to gain from the data that's there. You can actually help expedite the actual core infrastructure. I was in China probably about 3 weeks ago and had this really nice trip. And when you look around, you kind of compare. I came back to Europe and I was so disappointed because I'm originally from the US. And I've been living in Germany now for 20 years. And every time I go back home to visit my family in the US, I'm like, man, we're so far ahead. I feel so good to be living in Europe. Then I went to China. and let me tell you, it's like, we are, when I came back here, we were living in the past because they've really cut down a lot on the red tape. It's so much easier to get stuff done. Stuff just gets done, they break it, and then they fix it later. But you have now these new experiences and these new things that just work so well that it's actually incredible. Really basic thing is, as you're driving, and on your screen, you actually have communication between your traffic lights and the vehicles. So we're talking about other things like regulation. So let's think about environmental aspects, CO2 footprints, and so on. If you're enabling this whole entire communication layer for everything, it's part of what you guys are doing, right? That actually enables it so that you can create these new experiences which also help you have better environmental impact. You're actually able to have cars sit less idle on the road, which means that they're going to have a lower carbon footprint. A lower carbon footprint means, oh, okay, that's great. I can smell cleaner air. That's a good thing. For taxes and corporations, many large companies, fleets, all these other guys are prepaying how much they're paying for something called CO2 tax. Some of you may be familiar with this. But if you're able to track that and say, well, actually, now we're able to show you that we're using a lot less energy you can reduce those costs and save billions, because it's like a 20 billion a year problem for a lot of companies. So there's a lot of things, I think, from not just a resilience point of view, but a product point of view and a practicality point of view that we really need to think about when we're talking about this side. So that was about 2 minutes, I think, right?
A lot more, but I'll
Perhaps.
let that
Right,
slide.
yeah.
So just to pull that together, you're basically saying that as an industry, we need to look out to others and learn and combine and not have that straight view on putting fiber in the ground, but really looking at all aspects.
Yeah, it's taking that, and everyone actually has this experience now. Like, how many people in here have an iPhone, or like, one or two, right? And which is a great thing. Now, if you also have other Apple devices at home, and I'm not trying to sell Apple here, even though I formerly worked for them, disclaimer, right? You have HomePod, you have Apple TV, and all these other things which work as hubs. And that's all a complete seamless experience, connected experience, right? So those experiences are the things we should be looking to fuel.
Sure. You said one word that I really liked, and that was cross-pollination. Very environmentally friendly. But cross-pollination brings me to Moritz. Last but certainly not least. A little bit different than the other speakers, I'm just going to give a bit of an introduction, because Moritz, I think when I wrote to him to ask him to join the panel, he looked at me and he said, what am I supposed to be doing at a digital infrastructure conference when I am specialized on renewable energy? And what Mark picked up is quite right. So we look at bringing fiber into the ground, and now the new thing is we like to invest in data centers, greenfield, brownfield, very in right now, or en vogue, very nice. But we forget that a data center also needs a little bit of energy, and a data center needs a little bit of fiber optics probably, and a lot of space, and all of that. So I think this cross-pollination is really, really important, that we look at other industries to see how are they financed, what can we learn from them, why is energy important for our industry, for digital connectivity. So that's a little introduction to Moritz, and I just pass it on there to him. Maybe he wants to add 1 or 2 minutes of additional information for you.
Okay, thanks for Maxi. I mean, without us being bold, there would be no digital transformation. So my name is Moritz Weiss. I'm working for Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. We are probably one of the biggest developers globally in renewable energies. So, I mean, thanks, Maxi, for 32 billion of euros under management. But what is even more important, we have more than 160 gigawatt in development globally, which is more than the complete renewable build-out Germany has at the moment. So that brings us to a complete different layer. And when looking at the digital landscape, and that's why I was not so worried about what I'm doing here, but most of our customers now are the digital guys. So we're main provider with Amazon, Google, and the likes. So if a data center comes up, then we are probably one of the guys they are calling at first place. So because what we are doing is like building up large industrial scale renewable power plants. And the way we build it, it's the cheapest power. I mean, there are some spots globally where it's cheaper to have gas, but that's maybe Texas, and even that, Texas is the biggest renewable build-out in the States. So even a red state can be green. So on the one hand side, we are doing a sustainable effort for the world, but on the other hand, we are producing a really cheap source of power. And when looking at China, I mean, the China build-out, okay, it's also nuclear and coal, but the main build-out in China is also on renewables. And what you said before, I mean, they don't have the red tapes. We still, at least in Europe, have quite a lot of red tapes. Getting rid of them is quite difficult, but that's what we are working on, and that's where we're also trying to achieve a lot of political stuff. So we're not only trying to get private money, so we're just the opposite of Alexandra. We're not relying on public money, but we try to help the public money to save it on other sectors, but also bring in private money. And I think on the other hand, what we also do with the private money, we generate nice returns. So from my perspective, I mean, I know that's not a financial conference here, but we also are one of the best products which a pension fund or insurance company can invest in, because we have reliable income due to the guys like you, so giving us 20 or 30-year PPAs, so energy offtake agreements, which is really nice to have them with Google, Facebook, and the like, because these are quite sustainable companies on the long run. And on the other hand, we have very nice income. So for us, the main factor is, and that's where we also engage with the government, how we get more money from the industry, how we get more money from our big saving accounts. And that's what we are working on.
Thank you very much, Moritz. I think it's nice that you made the point that we do all fit together quite well at some point, right? So I just kind of want to pivot back again to our basis, and our basis really is the 2030 goals. And I'd love to know, Fernando, you gave us a good background on the infrastructure mapping and public funding that you're doing and that you are engaging in. How do you think other European countries can learn from the setup that you have made available to sort of close the gap?
Well, I think the most part of the European countries, at least almost the most part of with whom we speak with, has mapping initiatives. So I think they know quite well where are the white areas, where are the opportunities to fill the gap. What we are trying to do is, one step forward in Spain, we are now embarking in the GIA new law implemented, it's set in force next month of May, and we'll try to build up a new map combining not just telecommunications network, but as well overlapping with electric ones, if it's possible, gas and water, to see whether there are convergence among them, at least for the new deployment, to speed up new deployments in fiber and reduce the cost. But this is a new step that we are trying to move forward. But there's a lot of countries in Europe that are doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, it's important to kind of look ahead and not just for our industry to reduce costs, but also to make sure that the citizens that we are disturbing a little bit once in a while with our underground work maybe only see a street opened once and not 3 times in a year's time. So that's really nice. Marianne, do you have a similar system of approaching identifying gaps in rural areas, or do you have a completely different approach to Spain?
I think we have partly the same, but partly they're totally different, because at this point we don't have any other funding than our rural funding for rural areas. Yeah. Of course, private operators are investing a lot, and they are doing the city areas and the centers, but the rural areas are huge in Finland, and they are really sparsely populated, so it's not business for anybody. Mm. So it's mainly the basic service and basic infrastructure that we are now building in those areas. Our Ministry of Communications is starting this digital strategy project that they are now trying to find the way to the targets of 2030. But in Finland, in rural areas, we need funding, and that's the fact.
Do you think it's possible to entice private investors to invest in such scarce areas, or is that really just then the goal of the government or the regulator to go ahead and push that? Or do you see sort of a connection there, that there's a balance, or there are more public-private partnerships that you're pushing ahead?
There are certain areas that most certainly are going to be built by private investors, but in really sparsely populated areas, where I see the people who are living in those sparsely populated areas are the securement for Finland at this moment, because if we let the big areas be empty, so there's nobody watching around, and it's free way for somebody. So I see those people really important who live in islands or who live in eastern border. So I think we at the state should do something, because it's not the business there.
Yeah. You know, we set the goals, so obviously we have to support them as well as government and regulators. Yeah, absolutely. So, Moritz, just pivoting back to you, I'll give you some more speaking time. I think that's important as well. No, I'm kidding. You're talking about financing infrastructure projects and raising capital. What do you think are really the biggest challenges raising capital for a regulated market? Because same as digital infrastructure, you see regulation in energy as well.
Yeah, the markets we are targeting is not the regulated markets mainly.
Okay.
So we are also building transmission. So we built more than 2,000 miles of transmission lines as well. But the transmission line more or less comes with the assets. So the assets we are building, like if it's offshore wind or it's onshore wind, PV, or our biggest commodity at the moment is battery storage. We don't need any subsidies for these assets anymore.
Of course, but you're still facing some sort of red tape regulation with the government well, I remember selling my first wind park. That seemed quite complex to me, looking at German structures there. So I'm sure it's not quite as easy as your...
It still is. I mean, the big advantage of our company is that we have such a huge portfolio, so we can move wherever we want. And we have a very big pipeline, so if one asset doesn't proceed in time, then we can skip to the other.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes us probably, sorry for being a little bit unfair to you guys, but that makes us different to the rest here. So we are only in charge of the money of our investors. So if the project is in Europe, or if it's in US, or if it's in APAC, I mean, we for sure try to be everywhere, and we try to be diverse. So we try to be in every country with a certain kind of amount. But we are not like stick to any jurisdictions, but we can move where the pipeline is, where also the suppliers are at the moment. So we have to be flexible, and that's probably our big advantage in this relationship. Coming back to Germany, I mean, I am from Germany, so I have a high interest in that country as well. So. But here, I mean, regulation is still very difficult. I mean, the last government was very supportive in some ways, at least in our direction.
Yeah.
Let's see what the new government brings up. So now we've got the so-called infrastructure bazooka. I mean, that sounds very interesting for us. We had just another discussion with it that hopefully the regulation will also be an infrastructure bazooka, so meaning that the money will really flow. It makes it easy to be invested in. But that's basically where we are. So I mean, for us, it's good to be a global company with a lot of offices globally, so we can move where it's easy for us. But there are certain countries, like especially in APAC, where it's really easy to build and where it's really fast from process-wise, and we have super governmental support also from the presidents of these countries. So we don't face corruption, we face push in these countries, and that's like extremely good for us.
Yeah. So your advice would be for the digital space to get rid of the red tape, be more international, and
get rid of the red
just
tape.
get rid of it?
Get rid of the red tape.
Go
I mean,
moving?
especially in Europe, if we don't get rid of the red tape, then somebody else will do so.
Alexandra, how do you feel about that?
It's music to my ears. Working from the European Commission side, right?
Yeah.
But it's let's say back to my slogans on what we're trying to do with the much promised Digital Networks Act and with the revision of the telecom rules. I think we're really looking at what can be achieved in the digital single market space, and really a lot of work. I mean, it's we're working on the proposals, and there's a lot of elements that are put already in the white paper. There is a lot of simplification, a lot of operations, but the bottom line is really there's a lot of harmonization on spectrum, there's a lot of harmonization for end users, or all these little rules that are different in the end in all the member states. Of course, there's a lot of views, and we don't get to do what we want. It has to be carefully negotiated, but I think there's a lot of hope that this time we will manage to really take the digital single market for telecom at least one step, if not 10 steps further.
I mean, the chance is there in the next couple of years that we really move it in Europe. And now everybody has to
I think we don't have a choice at some point, to push ahead and see where we can go there. So I'm taking away that essentially the European Commission is saying we will get rid of the red tape and we can all do some super investments without putting you on the spot, of course. I want to circle back to you, Yuri. It was a very heartfelt piece of advice I think you gave us, and I took away two things. Actually, from both Alexandra and you, it was collaboration and teamwork, and again from Mark, cross-pollination. It is a great word, isn't it? So all of us are struggling at different points, but we're all saying we need to work together to be able to solve the bigger problems that we are encountering. If you could give advice to other European countries on the issues that you're facing right now and how possibly we can learn from you, what would be your 3 things you would really like to say?
We can share our experience with all of us in different countries. But today we have a big opportunity to give some information to our investment, who find how can give new projects with Ukraine, because in Ukraine we have some big city with low pond penetration, and we find how we can improve it. Last year, the biggest investment in Ukraine from French, maybe listen about telecom company NJJ. If French now, why come to Ukraine? Maybe you are now too. And if you work in a company who find how can investment to Ukraine, you work in right company. Today we can together make a lot of good experience because we have good fast decisions. We make good fast decisions, but we have problem with a long-term requirements to stay connected and saving all good connect with world in long term. With Eurocommission, we find some opportunity to set up projects to support Ukrainian telecom market. If you are make it, we will be happy. And presenter from Ukrainian company too, because today we have a good experience and we can share it with all company, all governments in Europe.
Happy to learn more about it.
Thanks.
Mark. Oh, I woke him up. That's good.
It's like I got called out in class. I'm sorry. Years ago.
So we're talking about resilience, but resilience has so many facets to it as well in security. Obviously, we're also seeing a rise in cyber attacks in addition to physical network disruptions. How do you think decentralized networks and alternative technologies can aid in that?
I'll give 2 different perspectives here. The first is like based on the current industry that I see now. There's just raw piping that's being put in the ground, more or less. There's some nuances to it. And I think from a security perspective, what needs to be thought about in the future, because let's face it, if you take an anchor and drag it in the ocean, you can kind of tear up the infrastructure that's taking place now, right? So you need to have things that are put in place to start sensing and determining what's around. That means that you need to put objects, like simple objects that are being placed, sensors, to determine what areas are prone to attack so that you can defend them earlier. That's something which I think in itself is entirely missing at this point. And it leaves the entire infrastructure right now vulnerable. We've just seen this happen a few times over in the North Sea, right? So this is something that I think we need to work on. The other piece is that we talked about earlier about these massive wind parks and all this other nice stuff. I have to say that if you move too slow, you get disrupted. That's how tech works, right? When we take a look, for example, at the energy industry, and then I'll get to the communications industry in a second. The energy industry right now, we just actually heard a really good point on energy storage, battery storage. And a big piece of that that's going to come in the future is the automotive industry is going to start playing a big role in that. And some of you are probably asking, well, how? Every car in the future that's going to be an EV is going to have a battery, right? And when you have a battery, you can actually manage the storage, what goes in, what goes out. When you charge your car up at home, if you have solar power, I would actually argue that might be cheaper than some of the other scenarios out there, but that's another story. We could have it fun. But I would basically look at it and say, well, that's the start of a decentralized ecosystem. So you're not building these huge power plants now. You're building a decentralized system which has a lot more resilience, much like you've seen in Ukraine. I would actually then take that same comparison and use Starlink as an example. So Starlink, the reason why Elon Musk has been able to move so quickly is because he's built an entire satellite network and has kind of basically said, you know what, instead of digging holes into the ground and taking a very long time to do everything, especially in a war zone, it makes a lot more sense to have strategic placements of satellites, or rather of satellite dishes, excuse me. And you can use those in certain strategic places in combination with the stuff you have in the ground. So that way you keep a much stronger resilience. So that creates a full decentralized system that stays out of control of one particular party and allows it so that you can have much more further continued resilience. It also means, though, that you open yourself completely wide to disruption, because if you don't change to those elements, you'll eventually get pushed out of the market. That's essentially what happens with other technologies that don't evolve. So I hope no one gets mad at me on that, but it's the truth. There's a lot of trends on that out there. I advise us to check it out.
So I take away, we as digital infrastructure providers, investors, builders, we all want, in Germany we say flächendeckender Ausbau, right? We want it to be everywhere and to be a full total coverage. And we should do that, but we should also have fallback plans. So I want to open the floor to a couple of questions that the audience may have. If you do have a question, raise your hand, state your name, let me know who the question is for. And then we go from there. If there are no questions, then I have to talk a little bit more, or you have to talk a little bit more. No? Okay. If there are no questions, I think we can go into closing remarks. My key takeaways for this is collaboration, teamwork, cross-pollination. Let's look across our own plate, see what other industries are doing, see what other investors are doing, listen to each other, help each other, and work towards a more positive, sustainable, long-lasting digital and energetic future. That's my takeaway. So I'd love to hear from all of you, maybe one or two sentences, maybe a little bit different than the German politicians during the last elections that never managed to keep it down to one sentence. Maybe you can make that happen. Love to hear your last thoughts on the topic. Mark, do you want to kick it off for once?
Yes, lucky me. I think just to keep it short and simple, pay attention to what's around you, because eventually it's going to govern what you need to do down the line. As simple as I'll take it.
Good job.
Yeah.
Take away the red tapes for the green energy. I mean, we help you digitize.
I would say that we have to prepare and be safe in everywhere in Europe.
I wish you be all time online. It's very, very important.
I cannot watch my food delivery guy, and I live in the middle of Hamburg. It will jump from the restaurant straight to my house. There is no connectivity there at all. Can you imagine that?
I use speed test in my hotel in Netherlands.
Yeah.
It's nearly 6 megabits per second. I think in our bomb shelter, internet is the best.
Well, just reinforce your message. I think resilience is something that we have to bear in mind in every single decision that we have to make going forward.
I I guess it's on me now. No, I only have a big thank you to tell you all for the attention, for the your interventions, which were very comfortable for me in the sense that I see, look, what we're working on is really very relevant. It's happening out there. So now we just have to make it happen together, like you said.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure having you here. I think we got a lot of insights. I think it was a little bit different than where we are used to in the digital space, but I hope you enjoyed yourself, and give a whole round of applause to our panelists today. Thank you.